Okay, look, our first guest is none other than Mr. Tom Webb, who is here bright and early. Thanks for listening. Did you like the slides I did on Canva, by the way, Tom?
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Why don't I turn the Raindance training open house over to someone who's made more corporate videos, has interviewed more red carpet stars than I have fingers, or for that matter, hairs in my head, Mr. Tom Webb.
Hi, everybody. So as Elliot said, I'm one of the tutors for Raindance, and I run the Practical Documentary Filmmaking Foundation. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll give you a quick overview of what happens in each of the 5 classes that we cover. And so basically, I started off as a teenager making short films, sort of narrative short films, loved doing all of that, all the production process, and sort of decided I wanted to be a filmmaker. Made a bunch of shorts, did lots of different jobs, ended up getting a job where I had to reversion US TV shows for UK TV stations. So basically I would get sent some kind of American reality TV show, usually sort of like the ones on like Sky Living or Discovery Home and Health and that kind of stuff. So it's like Bringing Home Baby, or there was one called Shalom in the Home, about a rabbi. And it basically, my job was to sit there and watch this show that had 10,000 ad breaks in it, because that's how American TV works. And I had to then piece together a runtime that would work for a UK broadcast and fill in the gaps using extra footage that they supplied. So that's kind of how I started my career doing that. Actually sort of making money as someone who did video production and filmmaking. I then worked as the head of production at a sort of digital agency / video production company that specialized in film promotions. So I would film and edit all of those film premieres and press junkets that you see. So whenever you see an actor sitting down in a black room with a nice poster next to them talking about the movie that they've just made, I used to film those and edit all of the content. And alongside that, we also did corporate work for people like Bupa and Which Consumer Magazine and all sorts of stuff like that, Talk. And so I'd range from these kind of very glamorous A-list Hollywood stars to CEOs in suits, or care workers, or people in the medical profession. And then outside of that, I also made my own feature-length documentary that's now available on Amazon Prime, Vimeo. So I've got a kind of a breadth of experience. I've made a few more narrative shorts recently, which have gone on to sort of win awards and take part in things like the Raindance Festival and stuff like that. So that's kind of my background and where I come from. And I'm one of those people that I like to have at least tried every element of the filmmaking process, and I like to have dipped my toe into every kind of element of it, so that I might discover that it's not for me, it's not something I'm particularly good at, but at least I understand what's involved. So when I'm working with other people and collaborating, it makes communication a lot easier, and I've got a much higher understanding of what they've actually got to do to deliver what I would like from them. So that's kind of how I work in my professional life, and now I'm a freelancer and I do corporate work. So I film and edit corporate things for various sorts of companies. So the course that I teach is Practical Documentary Filmmaking Foundation, and it's a 5-class course, and you can come into the course at any level, really. If you've done some sort of video work before, that's fine. You'll probably get elements of it you might find don't necessarily apply to you, but other bits will. If you've never touched a camera before, you just kind of like, I fancy getting into this, then I try to take it down to sort of that level as well, so that everyone can be involved. So I shall share with you my presentation. Okay, so hopefully you can see that now. Let me just bring that back over here. Okay, so the first class is just what is documentary filmmaking. So what are the basics? What does it actually involve? What is non-fiction, non-narrative? Well, not actually non-narrative, but non-fiction filmmaking, and what sort of types are there? The first class tends to be a little bit more kind of theoretical, so we don't really sort of talk about actually how to do things, but it's more about understanding how it's viewed, almost like a film theory class. So first things first is to get to know everyone. Something I really like to do is to listen to everybody about what they want to get out of the class and particular areas they're interested in, because once I know that, I can tailor further lectures and lessons, classes, to make sure I include some stuff that everybody is going to get something out of. We go through what documentary film actually is. We go through what are classified as the documentary genres. Most of my students would kind of think of what we call genres, you think of as styles. So it's kind of what styles of documentary, what ways can you pull together a documentary film. We look at common topics. We look at what the difference between a genre, a topic, and a subject is, because those words can be quite interchangeable. So we kind of define them a bit more to have a more specific meaning throughout the course. And then we do a Q&A discussion. So in the first session, it's more, again, a bit about getting to know each other. People can ask me questions about anything. We can talk about what's to come in the course ahead, or you can ask me questions about my own experiences or what have you. Class number 2 is subject style and why equipment isn't important except when it is. So following on from the first week, we start to look at, if you've got an idea for a documentary, how do you start pulling that together and making the decisions on how you're going to make it a reality? What are the sorts of things that you're going to need, what questions you're going to need to ask yourself to work out what the documentary is going to look like, how are you going to achieve what you want, how are you going to film it. We look at whether the equipment you use is really important. Do you need a cinema camera? Do you need a mirrorless camera? Do you need a DSLR, or do you need a phone? It can be any one of those things, and there are certain times when that won't matter. Whatever you've got is what you need, and other times you're going to have a decision about whether you're going to hire kit, buy a kit, use something a bit more expensive, a bit more higher quality. We'll have a brief look at sort of platforms and distribution, how you get your documentary, like where can you put it, and the impacts that has on pre-production. So knowing where it's going can have effects on the decisions you make before you even start. Camera basics. I like to go through exactly like how a camera works. What aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and all of those kind of things. I find that it took me a long time to really kind of pinpoint the relationships between all of those camera settings. And I find that even if I'm working with somebody who doesn't want to know how to operate a camera, if they've got a reasonable understanding of how it works, it makes communication a lot easier. If I'm working with a producer, I like to make sure that they kind of have a knowledge of how a camera works, so that if we're on a shoot together and something happens and I need to react or do something quickly, I can say, I need to change this lens, this is why, and they understand. And it just cuts down that explanation time, means things can move a lot quicker. So I like to go through the sort of camera basics and get everyone up to speed on that if people don't know. We look at composition of your shot, what things look like and what effect that can have on your audience, whether that's something that you want to consciously play with and utilize. For the feature-length documentary that I made, it was men sharing personal experiences of fertility treatment. So it's a very sensitive topic, and it was something where it was really important for me that they were looking directly into the lens, because I wanted them to have direct contact with their audience. So composition for me in that instance was very, very important. Other times you're out and about and you're reacting things and you're just trying to make sure you've got something. Excuse me. Then we have B-roll is actually A-roll, and how important it is not just to get your core interview, but to get everything that you need to surround that. Lighting, some basic 2 and 3 point lighting techniques, and sound, location sound, how important it is, and how you should think about how you're going to record it. And then the third class is all about interviewing. I've called it empathy or antagonism. And we go through things like how you do your preparation, how you research, what approach you want to take as a filmmaker to your subjects, how you gain their trust. Do you know whether you're going to do something that's going to upset them? Are you going to break that trust? How do you reconcile that within yourself as a person, but also how do you decide which way you want to go with it? How you prepare to react to things that you might not have thought could happen. How to ask really difficult questions. The sucker punch in terms of how to get somebody to reveal something that they might not necessarily don't want to, but might not realise they kind of need to or expecting to. What sound bites are and how to get those, if that's the sort of thing that you need. That's particularly important if you're doing corporate work. Communicating with your crew on set, again, is very important and quite often needs to be done without your subjects or your clients knowing. Like if there's a problem, you might need to communicate something to your crew without letting on that you need to fix something or that something isn't a less than ideal situation. So there's some techniques on how to do that. And then because we're at sort of the halfway point, we do some questions about anything in the previous sessions, or any questions, or pick up any things that people have decided they're interested in exploring further in the following classes. So class 4 is all about post-production. So I try to go through post-production workflow, the usual sorts of workflows that people use. I take you through a project walkthrough where I sort of screen share my project for a feature-length documentary and explain how I took like 15 hours worth of footage and turned it into 90 minutes, and how I went about approaching making the decisions for that. We talk about narrative structure and how important that is to any film, having a good story, and how you go about finding it. Because with a documentary, there are different ways. It's less like a narrative feature film where you have your script. With a documentary, you may know the story going in, you might not, you might discover something, things might change as you go. We'll talk about things like representation of your interviewees and sort of the ethics of that. How to make difficult decisions in terms of what you include and what you don't. Whether you should use narrators, animation, score, soundtracks, and then how to go about getting feedback. And a critical eye of somebody else. And then the final class is called Passion versus Profit. So this is more about how do you make the films you want to make, but how do you make money from that? Are there things that you will go and create for money? Like, well, are there corporations and things you will work for, you won't work for? How you keep your motivation and your mental health in good check, because anyone who's been on a film set will know that it can be like a 20-hour day and it's pretty brutal. And how do you sort of maintain your energy for that sort of thing? Especially if you're working on a project and the only thing you're getting out of it is money, which is vital, but sometimes that's not the best thing for you as a person. We talk about how to take pride in things, even if it is just for the money. How you can work with your clients, not for your clients. And something I often like to do is, a client might come to you with an idea of what they want, but it's often good to kind of pitch back and say, okay, we can absolutely do what you want, but have you thought about doing this? And then I'm sure all of you who are online today have got a multitude of skills that you've picked up throughout your life, and they can be all sorts of things, but you can probably apply them to some aspect of filmmaking. In the last class that we did, we had lawyers, and we had marketeers, and we had all sorts of people from different backgrounds. We had photographers, and people like the photographers were obviously really keen on the camera stuff, and that kind of was an obvious fit. But the lawyers were great at research, they were great at knowledge retention, they were great at interviewing, and it was just making people realize that, oh, actually I have a skill base that I can use, and I have resources within myself that I can tap into. So we kind of go into that a bit. We talk a bit about passion projects, and then we just finish off with a Q&A and a discussion, and we can kind of pick up on anything from the course. If there's any questions that people have specifically, I think last time we talked about all sorts of things, whether it was how you go about picking the camera that you might want to buy, or what sort of sound equipment was useful, or how do you reconcile having a difficult conversation with somebody on camera when you know you're going to upset them, that kind of stuff. So we had all sorts of discussions, and it was good. So that's kind of the overview of the class. I still have some time left, so I thought if anyone's got any questions and would like to ask anything now about the course or anything really, I'm happy to do that. So if anyone has got any comments or anything, I don't know if there's any in the chat.
Well, if no one has any questions, I sure do, Tom.
Okay.
But please, those of you attending.
Sorry, what was that?
Those of you attending, I'm going to go second. Whatever. Looks like everyone's got their cameras off. You're probably recording this and going out to the park to get some rays. Hey, my question to you is, Tom, looking back to when you were doing corporates and so on to now your narrative documentary, how has the monetization of your filmmaking changed, if at all, over the last, when did I meet you first? Like 12 years ago or something?
Yeah, something like it would have been around 2010, I would have thought, 2009, around then. It was interesting. So it was fascinating, really, because when I started working at the company I worked for, they had massive IPs on internet service providers on their books, and we were creating content. We were creating content, movie-based content for them, and some of them were paying like 40 grand a month for like 20 or 30 pieces of content about movies coming out. There was a huge amount of money in that, and then that just started to tail off and drop from about 2008, 2010 onwards. It just started to get smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually all those clients disappeared, and we sort of transitioned into going into making corporate films and things like that. And typically we would make it would depend on what client it was, but we might do a single corporate video for anywhere between £1,500 and £17,000, and it would totally depend on the project. One second, I just need to let my wife know something.
Go ahead. So Tom has worked professionally as a filmmaker his entire career, and as you were just saying, it shifted from corporate. Then he did his passion project, the documentary. Sorry to interrupt, Tom, and I know you've got a young one.
Yeah, no, she's just shouting. So I was just letting my wife know. It's all good. Sorry, what was the second question you were asking there?
Oh, just how it has changed, and how is it? Are you able to monetize your career as a documentarian in today's public health crises?
Yeah, so due to COVID and everything, that production company made me redundant. They actually stopped doing their video production because of the way it was structured. It just meant that there was nothing that we could do. So since the middle of last year, I've been a freelancer for the first time, and because of COVID, I can't really go and film anything for people. So I've kind of picked up editing work, and now I've picked up a couple of big corporate clients, and I think I picked up maybe a total of 5 or 6 clients on my books, and it's all the way it works. You know, there's one corporate client that's just like, we want to work with you and we want 20 days of your time, but we don't know when we're going to need it. So here's a lump sum of cash that covers 20 days of your time, and we will just tick that off as we go. And then they just email me and say, do you have availability next week or the week after? And we work that way, which is great.
Happy days.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Another client is, I want 2 videos a week. They're only short and they're super easy little edits, and I just get supplied all the footage, and we have like almost like a monthly feed, and that works great for me as well. And then there are other clients where it's just, I need you to do a video, it's a one-off, it's going to be these amount of days, here's a singular fee for it. So there's different ways of doing it, and you know, and I've sort of built up a network of people that I can work with. So for example, I did have a filming job booked in January, but due to COVID stuff, I just couldn't get there because it was I'm out in Essex, in the countryside, so I couldn't get into London. But I have a friend, and I was just like, I can't do this job. Can you sub in for me? And he took it on for me. So it can be quite a collaborative environment, because I know that if he's got some work that he can't do, he'll come to me, and you know, so it's very friendly, and you know, there's not much, I wouldn't say it's competition.
Well, that's cool, Tom. Now, surely someone listening must have a question for Tom Webb. Everyone's being shy. Maybe if you want to stop sharing screen just for a minute.
Sorry, I forgot.
That's all right. I asked Farzana, if you want, just unmute. I haven't seen it. Can you unmute it, Farzana, and just ask the question with your audio? No? Maybe
you should be able to unmute Farzana, Elliot.
There we go. All right. Or Dion's got a question. Hi, Dion.
Hi. Would it be interesting and useful for someone who never had experience in documentary?
Yeah, it's
any filmmaking, really, to attend the course.
Yeah, absolutely. In the last course we had people who had literally just thought, I've seen this course, I'd like to do that, and they knew nothing about cameras, they knew nothing about editing software. And if there are people like that on the course, then I go through things right from the foundations. You know, we look at a camera, and you know, all the basic stuff. In fact, I can show you. When it comes to cameras, we take a look at this, which is a 1926 box Brownie, and this, which is a sort of compact cinema camera. And the functionality of these two cameras from a basic level is exactly the same. And it's when you understand how that works, you just have to find out where the buttons are on there. You know, and there's a few extra bits, obviously. But I like to strip it back right to the basic concepts, whether it's camera work, editing. So yeah, I like to be able to pitch it to someone who has never even thought about filmmaking before, but also have useful elements for people who, you know, on the last course we had people who are professional editors who are interested in expanding their skill set. We had people who were professional photographers who are interested in doing video work. So even though I was going back to basics on certain areas that they were experts in, the rest of the course helped. So that's how I like to teach anyway.
How does that answer sit with you, Dion?
Yes, thank you.
And Dion,
Hi.
you are a member of Raindance, and should you book this course, you will not only get the 20% members discount, but the Raindance Rainbow Sale 20, that's 40%. It's so ridiculously cheap. I'm glad my bank manager isn't listening. Anyway, someone else wanted to ask a question. Tom's got a few more minutes, so I've already seen Simon Hunter, our next guest, queuing in the Zoom room. Anyone else with a question?
Hi, can anybody hear me?
Yes.
That's Farzana. Yeah.
Hi,
go ahead.
Tom.
Hi.
Hi there. I just want to know that I've applied for the Netflix Talent Development Fund, £40,000, and I was, so this would be useful for all that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if it's we don't go into
Documentary filmmaking, yeah, because they're looking for a 10-minute documentary.
right.
They're looking for applications to
Mhm.
produce documentaries, so this would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something you've never done before, then yeah, it would be useful. We do. We talk a little bit about sort of distribution and that kind of stuff, but this is, we mostly concentrate on the actual production of it. Netflix is an interesting beast when it comes to distribution and what have you. But if you're already looking into one of their schemes, then yeah, this could be a good kind of fill in some of the gaps on if you've got to make something to present to them, how you could do that if it's something you don't have experience in already. And definitely, yeah.
Okay, because I'm completely new, so I'm just I think this is really good. So thank you.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, it's one of those things. If like I say, when we get to know people on the course, once they've got specific things they might have an idea or something they want to share, or they might want to look at learning something very specific about the production process, then I can kind of try and tailor some stuff specifically to those people as we go through the course. And as I always try to leave some time so that we can talk specifically about something. So I tend to give a presentation, an overview of processes and how things work, and then afterwards we might drill down into something really specific in the question sessions.
Great, thank you.
Hey, we still have 4 more minutes. Simon Hunter, our next presenter, is joined us from Berlin. By the way, Simon, you and Tom should really have a chat sometime, because your career arcs overlap. Following Simon's presentation, we have the script coach attending, Mr. Jürgen Wolf, someone who's made over 100 TV shows in America. But you still have a few minutes to ask any last question of Mr. and underscore those 2 letters, Mr. Tom Webb.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Carly.
yeah, Carly, yeah.
I was just wondering, in the light of, the lockdown and with like the Tiger King and the recent Britney, have you found like the style of documentary has sort of changed in recent times, or does it sort of still follow the sort of traditional format? I don't know. I don't quite know where I'm going with that, because I'm quite new to film, but fine. I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, so that's something that we cover quite a lot in the first class, is the fact that documentary has really evolved quite a lot over the last 10 to 20 years. If you look back to sort of before the turn of the century, there was a lot of sort of Ken Burns style documentary where it's just, flat images and a narration and that kind of stuff. But then I think possibly one of the turning points for me, I often think about, is in around 2010 when Senna came out, made by Asif Kapadia, and it had this, it was presented in this way of just archive footage with interviews, and it just had this really powerful story to it. And yeah, we kind of look at the different genres of documentary and how that's changed, and we talk a little bit about Tiger King, and because I think that's an amazing example of social media and how important that can be now, and how incredible it is when something kind of goes viral or becomes this big thing. But also, it's possibly the most definitive example of how you can go into making a project and walk out of a project that you never expected. You can go into something thinking, I know what I'm walking into right now, and I know what this story is. And it just explodes and goes off in a completely different direction to what you imagine. So yeah, we talk about that kind of stuff and the evolution of it and different things, because now you could classify things like blogging as documentary filmmaking and non-narrative filmmaking. So even Instagram stories is non-narrative filmmaking. So there's all this new stuff that we need to discuss. We cover some of that in class 1, and it crops up throughout the whole course.
What about the TikTok 8-second non-narrative? Do you go into TikTok 8 seconds?
No, so TikTok is something I haven't dived into. I've kind of I'm not the greatest at social media, I will be the first to admit. So I haven't kind of dived into TikTok, but I have seen examples and how people are using it and the way things are going viral and stuff. So it's all of those things, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, as much as you may hate them, they are actually important. And we talk a little bit about that in sort of distribution elements, I think in the second or third class, I can't remember which.
Right. The British Independent Film Awards had 4 times as many people on Facebook than YouTube, and had 150,000 on YouTube. So gives you an idea of the power. Well, Tom, your class starts on Wednesday from 7 till 9:30, 5 Wednesday nights. So please, I've put the link in the chat box. Please do that. Thank you so much for giving up your Saturday afternoon. I hope you don't get sunburn if you go outside this afternoon. And everyone else, if you could reach to the bottom of your toolbar, click on the reaction buttons, and join me in thanking Tom for his time this afternoon. Thank you very much, Tom.